The wind screamed across Red Mesa as Wade, Langston drove his spurs into his horse's flanks, racing toward the smoke curling above the ridge. Something was wrong, he could feel it in the way. The ground trembled beneath the hooves, in the way the crows circled low, as if waiting for death to finish its work. He reached the crest and froze. 7 figures hung from a crude gallows built atop an old ritual mound, their bodies still swaying. For one terrible heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then Wade saw it, a twitch, a tremor, a barely there gasp from one of the women. They were alive, barely but alive. He leapt from the saddle before the horse even stopped, sprinting toward the structure. His knife was out in a flash, slicing the first rope. The woman collapsed into his arms, her skin cold, her breath rattling. He lowered her gently and rushed to the next. One by one, he cut the rope's fingers burning, lungs aching, until all 7 lay on the ground, half-conscious, bruised, but breathing. Who did this? Wade demanded, but the women could barely speak. Only one, a young woman with sharp black eyes, forced out a whisper. Not bandits, not drifters, men from the bank, railroad men. Then she fell into unconsciousness. Before Wade could gather his thoughts, gunshots cracked from the canyon below. Bullets kicked dust at his boots. He dove behind a boulder and drew his revolver. 3 riders in dark coats were closing in, rifles ready. One of them shouted, "Finish the job. Leave no witnesses, not the Apache, not the rancher." Wade's jaw clenched. So this wasn't random violence, this was a purge. Someone powerful wanted these women dead. And now they wanted him dead too. He fired first. The nearest rider toppled from his saddle. The other 2 split apart, circling, shooting wildly. Wade rolled down the slope, grabbed a fallen rifle, and returned fire. The second rider howled as a bullet tore through his leg. The third turned to flee, but Wade wasn't about to let him report back. One precise shot, and the man slumped over his horse's neck. Silence. Only the wind remained. Wade staggered back up the hill, chest heaving. The 7 women lay where he left them, fragile but alive. He looked at their faces, strangers, yet victims of something far bigger than a simple ambush. "This wasn't meant to scare anyone," Wade muttered. "This was meant to erase you." He didn't know why. Not yet. But he was going to find out. Red Mesa had blood on its hands, and Wade, Langston, was about to drag the truth into the light, no matter who tried to bury it again. Night settled over Red Mesa like a heavy blanket as Wade Langston dragged the injured women into the abandoned line shack he sometimes used for storing supplies. The desert air dropped fast, and the women, still trembling from the nooses, needed warmth before anything else. Wade built a fire, fed them water, and checked their bruised throats. The rope burns were deep, raw, and blistered. Whoever hung them had not intended survival. Hours passed before the first of them could sit up. Her name, she whispered, was Nira, the leader among them, though barely older than 20. Her voice was hoarse, each word scraping from her damaged throat, but her eyes burned with stubborn life. "They came before dawn," she rasped. "Men with papers. They said our land was no longer ours, that we had signed it away. But no one signed anything. My mother kept our documents hidden. She said the white men were changing them." Wade frowned. Forged deeds. He'd heard rumors in town talk of the Frontier Bank pushing through land transfers that didn't smell right. He never bothered to dig deeper. Now he wished he had. Another woman stirred, coughing weakly. "They burned the council lodge," she said. "We ran. They caught us. Said we were witnesses that needed to disappear." Wade clenched his fists. So the attack wasn't random. It was a purge. Executed cleanly, quietly, with no bodies expected to be found. if he hadn't ridden past that smoke. Nira caught his gaze. You saved us, but they will return. They will finish what they started. Wade looked to the cracked door, listening for hoofbeats in the night. Nothing yet, but trouble wasn't far behind. The men who ambushed him weren't drifters. Their rifles were too polished, their coats too similar. They were hired, hand-trained, organized, confident. What do they want with Apache land? Wade asked. Nira exchanged looks with the others. Fear radiated through the room. They found silver, she whispered. A vein running under Red Mesa. Enough to make the railroad change its route. Enough to make powerful men kill. Wade exhaled sharply. Greed that explained everything and nothing. If the railroad wanted the ground, they didn't need to erase an entire people. But banks, politicians, railroad barons, once they joined forces, lives became dust under their boots. Nira's fingers tightened around his wrist. If we do nothing, everyone will die. Our elders, our children. You saw the nooses. They want our nation gone. Wade met her gaze. A silent pact formed between them, unspoken but unbreakable. He could walk away, pretend he never found them, but the memory of those hanging bodies would never fade. Then we fight, he said quietly, and the fire crackled as if answering. By dawn, Wade had made up his mind. Staying in the shack would get them all killed. They needed allies, information, and a place the banks hired guns couldn't reach so quickly. His ranch lay 2 hours west, isolated, defensible, and stocked with supplies. It was their best chance. Before they left, Wade stepped outside to scan the horizon. The early light revealed fresh tracks in the dust, multiple horses passing through the canyon shortly after the ambush. The riders had circled, searching, hunting, and they weren't far. Wade saddled his horse and helped. The women onto 2 pack mules he managed to salvage from the shack. Nira insisted on walking at first, but her legs buckled after only a few steps. Wade caught her, guiding her into the saddle. You must survive, he told her. The truth dies without a voice. Her eyes softened, but she said nothing. They rode in silence, weaving through dry gullies and narrow passes. Wade knew these paths better than most. The land had been his only companion for years. But today, the familiar terrain felt hostile. Every rock a potential sniper's perch. Every shadow hiding a rifle barrel. Halfway to the ranch, they reached an overlook. From there, they saw dust rising behind them. 3 riders moving fast. They found us, one of the women whispered. No, Wade muttered, studying the movement. They're searching, but not for us. Not yet. Below, the riders dismounted near the creek. One of them held a map. Another drove a metal stake into the ground, marking territory. Wade recognized the insignia on their coats, the Frontier Bank Security Division. They weren't chasing. They were surveying. Nira's breath caught. They mean to divide the land before we are even buried. Wade's jaw tightened. They're building their case. If they mark it on paper, the law will listen to them before it listens to you. Nira stared at him. Then we must gather evidence. Real evidence, witnesses, documents. And we will, Wade promised. But first we survive. They pushed onward, leaving the riders and their survey lines behind. By the time the sun reached its peak, Wade's ranch appeared rugged, lonely, but safe. Or as safe as anything could be now. As he helped the women inside, Wade felt the weight settling onto his shoulders. This wasn't just about saving 7 survivors anymore. This was about exposing a machine of corruption powerful enough to crush nations. And Wade Langston had just placed himself directly in its path. Wade's ranch had always been a quiet cattle lowing in the distance, the creak of the porch boards beneath his boots. But now every sound felt sharpened, heightened, as if the land itself sensed the storm approaching. The 7 rescued women rested inside, but Wade remained awake, pacing the yard, checking the horizon again and again. Just before noon, hoofbeats echoed faintly across the open plain. Wade reached for his rifle, then relaxed slightly as the rider came into view. It was Sheriff Tom Greeley, an old friend. Or at least he used to be. These days, it was hard to know where anyone's loyalties lay. Greeley reined in his horse near the gate. His eyes were tired, his face drawn, and when he spoke, his voice carried something Wade had never heard from him before: fear. "Heard there was trouble near Red Mesa yesterday," the sheriff said. "Folks said they saw smoke. You weren't anywhere near it. Were you?" Wade met his gaze without flinching. "I was." Greeley exhaled sharply, shoulders sinking. "Wade, you need to be real careful what you say next. The frontier bank's been breathing down the county's neck. Railroad men too. They're claiming Apache rebels attacked a survey crew. They're spreading word of violent resistance, trying to justify whatever comes next." Wade stepped closer. "They hung 7 unarmed women." "That's what happened." The sheriff's eyes widened, but he didn't look surprised, only resigned. "I figured it was bad, but not that bad." He rubbed his temples, lowering his voice. "Listen, Wade, you didn't hear this from me, but there's a meeting tonight at the mayor's office. Bank officials, railroad lawyers, county commissioners. They're planning to finalize new land deeds and send federal marshals to secure Apache territory." "Secure," Wade growled. "You mean displace?" Greeley didn't deny it. "If those women are alive, you need to keep them hidden. If the bank learns they can testify, they'll send more than hired shooters." Wade's grip tightened on his rifle. "I need proof. Something real. Documents, letters, anything that ties these bastards to the hangings." The sheriff hesitated long enough to reveal how dangerous the idea was. "There might be something." He leaned closer. "Frontier Bank keeps all its land deeds in the office vault. And I've seen a ledger. Payments, bribes, names you wouldn't believe." Wade's pulse quickened. "Evidence, at last. How do I get in?" he asked. Greeley looked away. "That's the part I can't help with. If I get caught, they'll bury me." He turned his horse, then paused. "But Wade, the vault clerk leaves at sundown. And there's a back window with a busted latch." Their eyes met, and a silent understanding passed between them. When the sheriff rode away, Wade returned to the house. Nira was awake, sitting upright, watching him with unreadable intensity. "You spoke to someone," she said. Wade nodded. "And tonight we're going after the truth." The sky over Red Mesa darkened into a deep copper dusk by the time Wade, Nira, and 2 of the stronger women, Tala and Isku, set out toward town. They rode light and silent, cloaks drawn, every sense alert. The trail into Redstone wasn't long, but tonight it felt like walking into the mouth of a rattlesnake. Redstone itself buzzed with unusual energy. Extra lanterns were lit around the town hall. Wagons belonging to bank and railroad officials lined the street. Men in tailored suits and polished boots stood on porches, smoking cigars as if celebrating before the fight even began. "These are the men who tried to kill us?" Tala whispered, her voice shaking with anger. "Not with their own hands," Nira answered. "But they ordered it. Which is worse." Wade kept them hidden. In the alleys as they approached, the Frontier Bank building, 2-story structure with stone columns and a polished brass plaque that gleamed, even in the dark. On the surface, it looked respectable. Inside, Wade knew, was rot. They circled to the back, stopping beneath the window the sheriff had mentioned. The latch was indeed broken. Wade pushed it open quietly and climbed inside first. The office was empty, rows of desks, shelves of documents, and a heavy steel vault door looming at the far end like a sleeping beast. Tala and Isku slipped inside next, Nira last. Her throat was still bruised, but her eyes were sharper than any blade. "We need 3 things," Wade whispered. "Land deeds, payment ledgers, and letters. Anything linking the bank, railroad, and county officials." They moved fast, scanning drawers, cabinets, and stacks of paperwork. Wade found a map showing new property lines that cut straight through Apache territory as if the people living there didn't exist. Isku uncovered a folder of foreclosure notices issued to families who had never taken a loan. Tala found envelopes sealed with the railroad's emblem. But it was Naira who discovered the most damning item. She held up a leather-bound ledger. Inside were names, dates, and transactions, large payments to county commissioners, deputies, even the mayor. And next to each entry, Land Acquisition Initiative. "This is it," Wade whispered. "This proves they paid for the hangings." Suddenly footsteps. Voices. The door handle rattled. Wade froze. Naira clenched the ledger against her chest. Someone was entering the bank. They had seconds, maybe less. Wade pointed to the window. "Go, now." Tala and Isco climbed through first. Naira hesitated, just long enough for Wade to see the fire in her eyes, the refusal to run ever again. He grabbed her hand and practically pushed her toward the window. The door swung open behind him. "Who's in here?" A man barked. Wade dove through the window as gunshots exploded behind him. They hit the ground running. And behind them, the entire town of Redstone woke to the alarm. Tonight, Wade Langston wasn't just protecting 7 survivors. He was stealing the truth. They didn't stop running until the lights of Redstone were distant flickers. Behind them, Wade forced the group into a dry ravine, hidden beneath jagged stone walls. Only when they crouched in the shadow of the cliffs did he allow them to breathe. Naira clutched the ledger to her chest like a newborn. Her hands trembled, though she hid it well. Tala and Isku gasped for air, their legs shaking from the sprint. Wade listened, straining for hoofbeats, shouts, anything that meant the chase had begun. A horn blared in the distance. Then another. "They know," Isku whispered. "They know we were inside." Wade wiped sweat from his brow. "They know someone broke in. But with luck, they didn't see our faces." Tala peered over the rocks. "What do we do now?" Wade looked at Naira. "We bring this ledger somewhere it can't be buried. Somewhere the law still means something." Naira nodded slowly. "Fort Carson. The federal post. That's 2 days north," Wade muttered. "And the railroad cuts through the open flats. They'll track us easy." "Not if we take the old canyon trail," Naira said. Her voice, still hoarse, carried the certainty of someone who grew up with the land itself. "It splits into blind passes. Even good trackers get lost there." Wade considered this, then gave a curt nod. Decision made. They traveled under moonlight, following the jagged spine of the mesa. Hours passed in tense silence until the adrenaline faded and the pain set in. Naira stumbled once, catching herself on Wade's arm. The bruises on her throat looked darker now, the marks raw and angry. "You need rest," Wade said softly. She shook her head. "Rest later. Justice now." He couldn't help but admire her, though he also worried she was pushing beyond her limits. By dawn, they reached Wade's ranch. He led the women inside, but before entering himself, he paused. Something was wrong. The horses were restless. The air held the faint tang of fresh gun oil. Wade signaled for silence, then crept along the porch. Through a side window, he saw movement inside. A shadow, 2 shadows. Armed men searching his home. They'd come for the women, for the ledger, for him. Naira appeared beside him, eyes narrowed. "We can't stay here." "No," he whispered. "But I'm not letting them take my land without a fight." He motioned for the women to circle behind the barn while he slipped toward a side door. The handle was cracked open, proof the intruders had forced it. Inside, Wade moved like a ghost. He knew every board, every creak. One man rummaged through cabinets. Another kicked over crates, cursing. They must have fled, one spat. Boss said the ranchers protecting them. Wade lifted the butt of his rifle. One decisive strike. The man dropped silently. The second spun around too slow. Wade fired once. The man collapsed. Silence. Wade didn't smile, didn't breathe. He knew this was only the beginning. He hurried outside. We leave now. They'll send more. Dust rolled across the courthouse yard as Wade stepped outside, clutching the stolen ledger against his chest. The pages inside were the last missing, link proof that the frontier, bank and the railroad had orchestrated the entire scheme long before the Apache resistance began. But he felt eyes on him, the kind that promised trouble. A shadow shifted near the water tower. Another figure leaned against a post, pretending to smoke. Wade kept walking, forcing his steps steady, but every instinct screamed danger. He reached his horse, slid the ledger beneath the saddle flap, and mounted slowly. The street was too quiet. No merchants calling, no wagons rattling, just wind and a tension sharp enough to cut through leather. When Wade nudged his horse forward, the first shot cracked. Wood splintered beside his shoulder. Wade kicked hard, bolting down the street as gunfire erupted from both sides. Men in Duster's railroad mercenaries charged after him. Wade leaned low over the saddle, weaving through crates and overturned barrels. A bullet grazed his arm, burning through flesh. He gritted his teeth and kept riding. Behind him, riders closed in, shouting orders. They wanted the ledger. They wanted silence. And they wanted it now. 2 riders flanked him. Wade yanked the reins, pulling into a tight alley too narrow for both pursuers. One crashed into a wall. The other fired wildly, missing by inches. Wade shot once clean, controlled. The man toppled from his horse. Bursting out the far end of the alley, Wade saw the open desert ahead. If he reached the ridge, he could lose them in the canyons. He pushed the horse harder, feeling its muscles strain, hearing shouts fade behind him. But just as he glimpsed safety, a lasso snapped around his torso, dragging him off the saddle. He hit the ground hard, air knocked from his lungs. A mercenary towered above him, boots crunching in the dirt. That ledger belongs to the railroad, the man growled. Wade spat blood and reached for his revolver, but the mercenary kicked it away. Before the man could strike again, an arrow whistled through the air and dropped him instantly. Wade rolled to his side and looked up to see Nera and 2 Apache women emerging from the rocks, bows drawn. "You're late," Wade muttered. Nera offered her hand. "You're welcome." They retrieved the ledger, mounted up, and rode toward the canyon. Behind them, more riders appeared on the ridge, silhouetted against the burning sky. The chase wasn't over, not even close. The truth was finally within reach, and the men hunting them would stop at nothing to bury it forever. The hollow beneath the cliffs offered a moment's peace, but only a moment. The canyon walls hummed with the faint echo of approaching riders, distant, scattered but organized. Wade studied the pathways branching from the hollow like veins, each one a possible escape or a trap. "We head north," he decided. "There's an abandoned telegraph station near the ridge. If the wires are intact, we can send a message ahead to Fort Carson. Warn them we're coming." Tala frowned. "Will they believe us?" "They'll believe official evidence," Wade said, tapping the saddlebag that now held the ledger. "And if they don't, they'll believe me when I tell them men are dying over it." Nera touched the canyon wall, tracing a symbol carved generations ago, circles within circles, the sign for watchfulness. "Our ancestors hid here for protection, but they also knew this place can trap the unwary." Wade nodded. "That's why we keep moving." They climbed out of the hollow and into the northern pass. the trail twisting sharply upward. Loose rocks skittered beneath their boots. The air grew thinner, colder, but the view unfolded wider with every step. A rolling sea of desert and distant mountains bathed in a pale morning light. Halfway up, a thunderous crack tore through the air. A shot. Close. Wade shoved Nira aside as a bullet sparked off the stone beside her face. Down! He barked. The group ducked, scrambling for cover behind a cluster of boulders. Wade spotted the sniper on a ledge across the ravine. One man, lying prone, rifle glinting. Railroad marksman, Wade growled. They're getting serious. Nira peered from behind the rock. Can we reach him? Not without wings. Another shot slammed into the boulder, sending fragments spraying over them. Tyla winced as a shard cut her cheek. Wade scanned the canyon. The ledge was too far for his revolver, too high for a safe climb. But then he noticed the overhang above the sniper cracked, thin, held together by stubborn luck. He grabbed Isku's arm. Give me your rope. Isku didn't question, she tossed him a coil. Wade tied a loop, swung it, and cast it upward. The rope snagged a jutting rock high on the wall. What are you doing? Nira hissed. Wade tightened the rope around his chest. Changing the angle, he pulled himself upward, scaling the vertical face as bullets cracked beneath his feet. One shot grazed his boot, spinning him sideways. He slammed his shoulder against the stone but held on, climbing higher. Finally, he reached a narrow perch. From here, he could see the sniper clearly focused, steady, unaware that Wade now had the advantage of height. Wade drew his revolver. One shot. A clean, echoing strike. The marksman toppled from the ledge, rifle clattering down the ravine. Wade climbed back to the group, sweat mingling with dust on his brow. Tala exhaled shakily. You could have died. Wade shrugged. We all could. But not today. The trail wound upward until the canyon opened, onto a high plateau overlooking the northern desert. Wind whipped against them, carrying the faint metallic scent of an incoming storm. Far ahead, perched on a tilted rise of rock, stood the abandoned telegraph station, weather-beaten, leaning slightly, but still standing like a stubborn relic of the old frontier. Wade approached cautiously. Stay back until I check inside. The building creaked under his boots. Dust coated the floor in thick layers. A broken chair lay overturned near the window. The telegraph machine sat on a desk, rusted but recognizable. Wade brushed away dirt from the sounder. The wires ran out through a hole in the wall and disappeared north toward Fort Carson. He tugged gently on the line. Intact. A rare stroke of luck. He motioned the others in. If this still works, we can send a coded alert. Nira stepped beside him. Will the soldiers understand? Yes, my father served at Carson. He taught me the federal distress codes. She touched the machine carefully, reverently. Then send it. Before they find us again. Wade tapped the key. Short bursts. Long pulses. The urgency in every strike echoed through the lonely station. Apache territory under attack. Bank and railroad conspiracy. Evidence in hand. Request immediate marshal support. Wade Langston. He repeated the message 3 times. Then 4. Silence followed. Minutes crawled. Sweat beaded on Wade's neck. The women watched him, waiting, hoping. Then, click. A faint reply tapped through the sounder. Message received. Hold position. Marshal team en route. Nira's breath trembled with relief. Tala hugged Isku tightly. The first spark of hope since the gallows ignited in their eyes. Wade allowed himself a small smile. Help is coming, but the moment shattered as a rifle cracked outside. The bullet tore through the station wall, splintering wood inches from Wade's head. He hit the floor. They found us. Shadows moved outside 6, maybe 7 riders circling the station. More than before. Better armed, determined. Nira crawled to the far window. They're surrounding us. Wade grabbed his rifle. We hold them off until the marshals arrive. How long? Tala asked, voice trembling. An hour, Wade guessed. Maybe 2. Isku tightened her jaw. Then we fight an hour. We fight 2. We fight until the truth stands. Gunfire erupted, rattling the station walls. Wade returned fire through a gap in the boards. A rider fell. Another ducked behind a boulder. The women took positions. Nera with the revolver Wade had taught her to use. Tala with her carbine scavenged from earlier. Isku with a hatchet ready for close combat. Outside, the riders fanned out. Inside, the defenders braced themselves. The telegraph line hummed behind them, carrying the truth northward. And Wade Langston knew one thing with absolute certainty. This battle would decide whether justice arrived in time, or whether Red Mesa's truth would die with them. The telegraph station shook with every bullet. Dust rained from the rafters, boards split, and the air filled with the sharp stench of gunpowder. Wade ducked behind an overturned desk, firing through a narrow crack just as a rider charged across the open ground. His shot connected, the man toppled, skidding into the dirt. But for every enemy that fell, 2 more took his place. Nera crouched beside the far window, gripping her revolver tight. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from exhaustion. Her throat bruised, her breaths ragged. Still, every shot she took was controlled, precise. She had become the symbol of what they were fighting for, a people refusing to be erased. Tala and Isku guarded the door, using the broken wall panels as cover. A volley of gunfire slammed into their barricade, shaking it violently. Tala cried out as a splinter tore across her arm, but she didn't retreat. She swung her carbine around the corner and returned fire. "Wade!" Isku shouted. "They're regrouping." He risked a glance outside. The riders were pulling back slightly, forming a tighter formation, preparing for a decisive charge. "They're going to rush us," Wade muttered. All at once, Nera wiped blood from her cheek. "Then we end it before they reach the door." Wade looked at her, this bruised, battered survivor holding the ledger. That could save her people, and something inside him crystallized. He wasn't fighting for himself anymore. He wasn't fighting for his ranch, or pride, or revenge. He was fighting for them. For justice. For what the West should have been. The sound of hooves rumbled like thunder. Shouts echoed through the canyon wind. Wade braced his rifle. Positions. The riders charged. The station exploded into chaos. Bullets shattered the windows. Horses thundered past the walls. Wade fired until the barrel burned his hands, dropping 2, 3 riders before they could close the distance. Tala's shots ricocheted through the dust. Isku hurled her hatchet at a man climbing the porch railing. He fell backward, screaming. But there were too many. One rider kicked in the half-broken door. Wade tackled him, fists slamming into bone, grappling in the dust until the rifle slid away. Another rider burst in through the rear window, grabbing Nera by the arm. She twisted, slammed the butt of her revolver into his jaw, and fired point blank. He collapsed at her feet. Still, more shadows filled the doorway. Wade fought through the haze, his knuckles bloody, his breath ragged. He threw the door shut and jammed a beam against the handles. "Report!" he shouted. "I'm alive," Tala gasped. "Alive," Isku echoed. Nera met Wade's gaze, eyes blazing. "They won't stop. Not until every witness is dead." Wade pushed a fresh round into his rifle. "Then we buy time until the marshals get here. We don't know if they're coming," Tala whispered. "We know," Wade said firmly. "Because if they don't, this ledger dies. The truth dies. And so does the West they claim to protect." The attackers charged a second time harder, fiercer, desperate to end the fight before federal lawmen arrived. Their boots hammered the earth, their gunfire roared like wildfire, and the telegraph station groaned under the relentless assault. Glass shattered, beams cracked. The entire structure felt ready to collapse. Wade, bleeding from a cut above his brow, shoved a cabinet against the broken window just as bullets tore through it. "Hold steady. They're weakening the walls." Nera crouched beside him, clutching the ledger. Her voice rasped, but her resolve was steel. "If the marshals don't come in time." "They will," Wade insisted, though fear crawled up his spine. "They have to." Isku suddenly froze. "Listen." A distant echo drifted over the plateau. Not gunfire. Not horses. A horn. A federal cavalry horn. Tala's eyes widened. "They're close." But the riders outside heard it too, and panic drove them into a frenzy. They surged at the station in a final brutal assault. One man smashed through the window frame. Another kicked aside the barricade at the door. Wade swung his rifle like a club, cracking it against a raider's skull. Nera fired her last bullet into a man lunging for Tala. Isku tackled another attacker to the ground, wrestling for control of his knife. The station was collapsing into splintered wood and violence. Then, a deafening blast shook the earth. The raiders froze. Wade froze. A line of federal marshals rode over the ridge, rifles raised, badges gleaming in the morning sun. Behind them, 2 cavalry wagons thundered across the flats. Their leader, a tall marshal with a scar across his jaw, stood in the saddle. "Drop your weapons," he boomed. The raiders hesitated for a single breath. Then the marshals opened fire. The fight ended in seconds. Riders tumbled. Horses scattered. The few who survived dropped their rifles and raised trembling hands. Dust settled over the field like a shroud. Wade staggered out of the station, Nera beside him. The marshal dismounted, striding toward them with quick, purposeful steps. "Langston?" he asked. Wade nodded. "You sent the message?" "Yes," Wade said, pointing to Nera. "And she carries the evidence." Nera stepped forward, holding out the ledger with bruised but steady hands. The marshal flipped it open. His eyes hardened. "This," he muttered. "This is enough to hang half the county." "Good," Nera whispered. "Let them feel the noose they gave us." The marshal bowed his head to her, not as a soldier, but as a man acknowledging courage beyond measure. "Your people will have justice. I swear it." For the first time since the gallows, Nera allowed herself a breath of relief. Over the next hours, more cavalry arrived, rounding up the remaining raiders. Frontier Bank officials fled Redstone, only to be captured by marshals at the rail depot. The mayor and commissioners were arrested by noon. The conspiracy collapsed like a rotten scaffold. And when it was over,